So here we have three major presentations, one talking about overall economic growth or agriculture growth, depending upon the country, and what impact it can have on nutrition. Somewhat, it's not enough, and there are other factors that matter. And then we have bridging the information gap for quality certification of low-cost, effective, but still very nutritious food that can be made rather than very high-cost, same nutritious food. So how do we go about it? I feel that's more like an institutional change that is needed. But think about what economic incentives can be given to multiply that type of a thing. And then we have the fiscal policy questions of taxes and subsidies on different types of food that can help improve the nutrition outcomes. Now, I would now open the floor for not only discussion with the panelists, but also invite comments, suggestions, and some good practices that they have observed in their countries. What economic instruments, levers can be used if we go back to in producing nutritious foods, in giving economic access to nutritious food, or in absorbing the nutritious foods. So from that point of view, if you have any suggestions, any wonderful examples, best practices, that would help us to report back in the final session. Floor is open for discussion. Yes. The lady there, right first. Yeah. Right there.
Thank you, Chair.
We are starting with the lady.
Okay. Hi. I guess my question is probably...
Could you introduce yourself also?
Sorry.
Please?
I'm Tulika Narayan with Apt Associates.
Mm-hmm.
My question would probably preface the discussion here, and I just, in the spirit of not staying in the silos of the discussions we are having, I wanted us to comment on the social lever versus the economic lever, and I guess it goes a little bit to the presentation that Professor Masters had. When we're talking about the knowledge gap about nutritious food and using certification as a method to do that, I wonder about the competing idea of giving direct information of knowledge about using nutritious food and making it at home, and what is the cost implication for the family in terms of buying the food versus making it at home. And if I'm doing the household budget right myself, and even also understanding the nutritional value of packaged food, I'm thinking, well, maybe doing it at home is better. And in that context, I wanted us to, the part that I worry about private sector partnership is to the extent that the private sector partnerships may perhaps leave out the smallholder farmers or the very poor, sort of similar to the comment that the minister from Rwanda made. And I would like us to comment on that and would like to hear on that.
We will collect all the comments, at least 5-7 first, before we ask the panelists to respond. Yes, gentleman there, and I'm coming there.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Bashasha. I'm from Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
My first comment goes to Olivia. Thanks for your presentation, and I think you chose your words very carefully. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering, because you say growth is good, and then somewhere you say neither growth in agriculture nor growth in non-agriculture is sufficient. But I wanted you to comment on whether you think growth is a necessary condition for improving child malnutrition. The reason I'm probing you on this is because from the previous discussions, I can see the countries in Asia and, of course, Latin America where nutrition has improved are those countries that have made strides in terms of economic growth. So I would like to see your take on that. Then Professor Masters, I think on quality certification, sounded very attractive, but I was wondering in countries where the public sector is unable to offer this important lever, do you see room for the private sector participation in offering this lever so as to leverage the exchanges that you talked about? Then the last speaker, Richard, I was wondering where your tax subsidy lever falls as far as smallholder farmers are concerned. It seems to me that this would probably work for the urban poor in very poor countries where, because the urban poor are the ones who interact with the market in terms of accessing food. But where you have a majority of people producing their own food, they don't interact with the market. Where do you see this kind of instrument being applied? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the gentleman here? And I'm coming back there. Could you just pass on?
Thank you. My name is Abdulhamid Abdouli. I'm from the International Fund for Agricultural Development in Rome. My question and comment is related to the presentation by Professor Masters, who is now taking notes. I don't think it's by mandate. IFAD always promotes smallholder farming, and I think the study you mentioned has something to do with that particular element in relation to how we can promote locally the small farmers to produce for a micro-entrepreneur to transform that raw product into a type of food of high quality, but of low price to the rural poor to be accessible. And I don't know if the issue of certification, perhaps it has to do with the big shots who would like always to block the law in order for them to preserve their own interests and to have this type of monopoly, whereby they say, oh, this food is not for good quality, and therefore we have to be careful, and so on and so forth. So I think perhaps it's got to do there. And maybe the donors you mentioned, you didn't mention the names, but the donors should have played a major role in some policy dialogue and advocacy at the decision-making level in order to ease the certification of this product, which perhaps could be a break out of this block. Thank you.
Okay, you have got a good. Yeah, there's a lady at the back, please. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question to Richard. Thank you very much, by the way, for the presentation. It was really interesting. So the main conclusion is that fiscal instruments are not efficient for regulation of the diet. But the question is, what instruments could be efficient? Increasing public awareness, or did you conduct the research to find out which instruments are the most efficient in this case? And because the questioner was like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we have another lady there, Amita, please? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my question kind of is linked to the one which my neighbor had asked and person from Uganda. I wanted to quickly reflect on the perspective that I thought was emerging from this panel, that we are basically saying, and broadly speaking, saying that growth, even agriculture growth, does not necessarily lead to nutrition outcomes, and then we allow that situation to reach to some kind of an urgency. Then we say that, but local initiatives, people by themselves cannot do it, so we need to do it through some grand kind of solution, which either comes through aid or market players, etc., etc. I was just wondering that we probably need to penetrate further into this kind of, if I'm correct in understanding this as a perspective emerging, and then try to connect with maybe the parallel session which must be going on social leverage and levers and governance. I think I got this impression mainly because of the first two presentation. One on, I'll just complete. One which said that we need to invest on the other aspect, including drinking water, sanitation, etc., etc. And as if it sounded is dealing from the larger issue of the production and employment in the primary sector where poor find their livelihood. And also in the dense and digestive food, what she said is we are not really trying to explore what can be done within the kind of social institutions, practices that we have, but immediately jumping to another extreme, saying that, oh, but this is the solution has to come from somewhere. to what you said is, I think therefore I would say that instead of trying to also bring in some successful cases either from aid or market, we may try to do a very serious research from looking at somewhat semi-poor households and try to find out how they have done the nutrition of the children better. We try to find those successful cases simultaneously is my plea. Thanks.
Thank you. There's a lady here, please. Yes, yeah.
I have a question for...
Wait, please. People have to hear you at the back also.
Oh, hello, Linda Fulponi. I have a question for Professor Masters. In the experiment of certification of the energy-dense food, on the market, were people offered also Cerelac and the local production of certified food? So, would there be a reputation factor? Would they still be choosing Cerelac if they could?
Okay, you have a lot of Cerelac versus other method. Okay, let me first count how many. There are quite a few. Okay. Can we start from John there, right there? I'm coming there on that. Yeah.
John Parker of The Economist. I just wondered for Dr. Tiffin's study, did you look at whether, even at a high cost, the tax subsidy regime actually did shift the diets of poor people in the direction of, lower fat, better, inverted commas, food? And if so, did you count that benefit to set against the costs that you outlined? Thanks.
John, could I ask you something? In your global travels on this question across different countries that you are covering, are there any good practices that you can tell us where they have made a significant change?
Good practices in what? Specifically nutrition?
Economic incentives which have led to dramatic changes on nutrition outcomes.
On the economic incentives?
Yeah, because we are looking at economic levers here. I'm worried about what I'll be reporting.
Yeah.
Anyway, you take 2 minutes. You can think of, because you have global coverage.
Yeah, I mean, the best I've ever come across are the conditional cash transfer schemes.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's worked fantastically well in Brazil. I mean, it's not cheap. It's something like 2% of the budget. Sorry? Well, is that, I mean, I don't know what, it's a lever that works really well. Is it an economic lever? I don't care so much. Oportunidades has done much the same thing. I mean, my experience has been that these programs, whether they're economic, social, or anything else, seem to work much better than lists of dietary requirements from nutritionists, or there aren't many tax regimes like this, but I'm sympathetic to the idea that, fiscal levers don't work. But as far as I can tell, sort of in terms of bang for your buck,
we'll come back to this,
are hard to beat.
Conditional cash. Can we have this lady here and then I come on this side? Yeah, I'm coming, please. Here, this lady here and then next gentleman right there.
Good morning. Thanks, Chairman.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Vinod Kotwal from Ministry of Food Processing Industries. And thanks for the very stimulating presentations that we had. But my impression is that, we have been dealing with micro issues here. In a country where the post-harvest losses are so high, and we are talking about leveraging agriculture for improving nutrition and health, it is also very important that we save what we produce. So, what I was looking forward from this expert panel was if you can also suggest some economic levers where we can reduce post-harvest losses, because they would in turn lead to what we are looking forward, that is improving nutrition and health. So, I would, expect if we can, as a government, we can get some guidelines or policy initiatives from you, because we have been doing a combination of fiscal as well as other measures, not too successfully.
Very good.
Thank you.
This is the issue of those who are operationalizing ideas, and if post-harvest losses are 1/3 of the produce, if we can really save on that, how much more nutrition we can add in the society. I will add one more little thing to that, that in high-value agriculture, 2/3 of the price formation takes after harvest. So what do we do to that supply channel, which is fragmented, inefficient? If we can improve that, then we can give the economic access to the consumer at a much cost-effective manner. So both ways, think about this post-harvest question a little bit more and what economic incentives can do there if there are. There was a gentleman right next to this lady, and then I'm coming. Please.
Sir?
Oh, okay, you have to. All right.
So, I have to say, on the basic assumption that when it is said that agricultural development does not support the increased nutritional level, I have to say that in a country like India, where most of the vulnerable sections, the society and poor sections, depend on agriculture, I apprehend they need more support for agricultural productivity to increase nutritional level. We cannot increase the nutritional level of those persons below the poverty line in the rural areas depending on agriculture without increasing agricultural productivity.
Okay, thank you. Very nice. Now, I think the panelists are getting somewhat restless. Please, please. I'm coming there. That's very exciting to see there is excitement in the room. But let's have this first round, otherwise panelists will forget which questions were where. So can I invite Richard first?
Okay. Thank you for all those questions. Let me deal with the question from John from The Economist first of all. Yes, we did look at the change in the distribution across the whole distribution. What we actually did was we had a sample of 7,000 households, and we simulated the effect of the policy at the household level. So every household's diet was simulated. So yes, we did look at that. Then if I could take possibly the first two questions that were addressed to me. The first one was the one about the smallholder sector, and the second, what instruments are efficient. I suppose let me just make a couple of remarks at a micro level about those two, and then wrap them up into a statement which I think addresses one of the comments over here, perhaps. Clearly, market-based instruments are only going to work where there's a market. So if we're talking about intra-household allocations of food, then it won't work. If we're talking about the smallholder sector where there is a level of trade taking place, and we're talking about a policy which isn't a diet-related tax or subsidy policy, then all of the issues that I talked about today are relevant. That is, be very careful about the distributional impacts of the policy that come about and the other unintended consequences that come about as a consequence of a policy that is directed at some particular objective. Then what instruments are efficient? I think what we do there is we learn from the epidemiological approach to this problem, and we talk about being much more targeted. In epidemiology, they talk about screening, and there are now methods of screening much more accurately for the kinds of disease or the factors that lead to the kinds of disease that we're talking about. So, in developed countries, screening for diet-related disease is appropriate. In countries where we don't have those sorts of methods available to us, and they may not be accurate enough, what we probably need to do is some kind of social screening. So understand what are the social factors that lead to those poor diets, and design instruments that are directed at achieving significant changes in the diets of those segments of the population that are necessary. So just to turn to the question about what overall are we concluding in this panel, I mean, given those two remarks that I've just made, I wouldn't want to say that fiscal policy doesn't have a place in this context. I don't deny the epidemiological approach which says that a population-based method is effective in saving substantial numbers of lives. So echoing what Olivia's conclusion is, I think what we're saying many of us, at least two of us on the panel, possibly three of us, is that economic policy isn't sufficient in addressing these problems. What we need is economic policy plus in addressing the comments. And then the final question related to macro issues, which was addressed to all three of us, and post-harvest losses. It goes way beyond my particular sphere of expertise to talk about instruments that particularly will address post-harvest loss. But what I would say is that, and this probably comes through in the way I've been talking and answering the questions up to now, is that I'm a micro fan. That I worry about policies that are directed at achieving aggregate goals that don't understand what issues, the micro-level issues are that lead to those particular issues. So I suspect there is not one problem of post-harvest losses. I suspect there are a number of issues that lead to post-harvest loss. And what needs to be done is to identify what those issues are and to have policy instruments which address each of those issues. Thank you.